we mentioned at the start offline before we started recording with you that we like to play games on our podcast. So the one that we wanted to play with you is about pricing a risk. Obviously, there's not a technical price we're looking for, but just thinking about how you might come to a conclusion there. So the one I wanted to introduce to you is the risk of getting food poisoning, whether that's included in a health program or elsewhere. But like, how might you think about pricing that as a risk or a risk class?
Well, interesting, food poisoning. So, well, there are people, I'm sure, right now that do look at food poisoning, and the first thing to do would be, you do a classic sort of actuarial approach of going, there are 5,000 people every year that go into hospitals, and they say, I've got food poisoning, and I'm unwell or really ill, or I'm about to die, and that's recorded, and you can get those stats right there. So you could sort of do that and go, on average, the risk of food poisoning is 1 in every X, right? And you can do that in some countries. Obviously, many countries you won't have that sort of data, so that'd be a bit tough. I think you could also, so that's a sort of like a bottom-up approach. It's a bit boring, but it's quite useful in many situations, right? But I think the more interesting thing might be to think about things like, well, what type of foods or condition of keeping foods produce food poisoning. So, chicken's a good example. Leave chicken out for a few hours, it can develop salmonella and a few other things. So you can very quickly get food poisoning from chicken. And, to what extent is food hygiene standards available? Do we have people have refrigerators and stuff like that? Or do people even know about it? Or can they do nothing about it? So, you get chicken sitting in a hot heat in some tropical country. Well, they don't have any choice. So I think I'd want to look at some of the drivers of food poisoning and see what happens there.